Hello, good evening, and welcome to WMT Review's 12 Nights of Halloween. I am Wiseman Tanofsky. Now let's talk about zombies. Now, I was never a particularly great fan of the zombie genre, or their films for that matter. As I may have said, I don't really buy into the gore factor of a lot of horror movies, and I always felt like zombie films relied a lot on gore for the makeup and in many of the death sequences, but it was more than that. As the years progressed, the zombie genre grew stale and repetitive, and more liberties were taken with the abilities these shambling, reanimated corpses possessed. Then one terrible day, they started running, and before I'd even watched my first zombie movie, I was already done with them. A reanimated corpse cannot run, and so the undead were slowly replaced by the infected, afflicted with some ailment akin to rabies, but not in actual fact the living dead we remember. My first zombie film came shortly after this, the Simon Pegg Nick Frost comedy Shaun of the Dead, and ever since that film I have discovered a new love for the shambling undead. I delved more into the subliminal implications of zombies and what they stood to represent in popular culture, and then one day I discovered George A. Romero, the master of the classic zombie movie, and it is to this milestone of directing that we look on tonight's review, with the 1968 horror classic Night of the Living Dead. First in a long franchise based around the gnawing ghouls, Living Dead has become a cult classic in the horror genre and still rises from the grave to defend its legacy to this day. So let's have another look. This is Night of the Living Dead. So what's the story this time? Barbara and Johnny, played by Judith O'Dea and Russell Streiner, visit their father's grave at a remote cemetery, where they are set upon by a horde of vile, shambling and aggressive assailants. Losing her brother, Barbara takes shelter in a local farmhouse, where she's soon joined by Ben, played by Duane Jones. While the stress of the situation deteriorates Barbara's mind, Ben sets about fortifying the house against the attackers, when he is shocked to discover a group of survivors taking shelter in the basement. As tensions fray between Ben and the leader of the other group, Harry, played by Karl Hardman, their chances of making it through the night lower as they attract more and more of the undead to their location. An escape attempt kills two of the survivors before the house is utterly overrun, leaving Ben the last man standing, hiding out in the cellar. However, he's mistaken for a zombie in the morning and shot on sight by armed civilians. Unlike a lot of zombie movies, this film wastes no time throwing you into its subject matter. The first zombie encounter occurs less than 10 minutes into the movie, and the tension doesn't stop there. With my supposedly veteran experience with horror survival movies, I assumed it would be simple to work out who would live and who would die. But as main characters started to be axed off left and right, it truly leaves the viewer with no idea what to expect. Equally, where most monster movies beforehand, such as Dracula, Frankenstein and Wolfman, had taken place in Transylvania, Switzerland and Wales, Night of the Living Dead takes place deep in America itself, bringing the horror to the audience's front door. Well, not my audience, but you know what I mean. The fact that it takes place in Pennsylvania and not Transylvania makes the horror feel even more real. Taking a look at the cast, Duane Jones leads the cast as the confident and resourceful Ben. Obviously wise to the matter at hand, and with the skills to board up a defensive area and hold off the attackers, Jones's character is a strong and assertive leader, taking control of the group and taking no backtalk from anyone. Judith's character of Barbara, on the other hand, seems to represent more the blind panic in the face of such an event, deteriorating almost into a paralysis of fear. For the most part, she just seems to get in the way, constantly trembling until finding her strength during the final moments of the film and her horrible demise. Karl Hardman plays the character we all love to see torn apart in these kinds of films, the arrogant and selfish Harry. This seems to be a character that appears in almost every film like this, making stupid and rash decisions out of a desire to be right and to be the leader while possessing none of the skills to achieve this. Then, of course, you have the helpless civilians of the crisis, the couple Tom and Judy, played by Keith Wayne and Judith Ridley, finding themselves between the two groups, starting with Harry in the basement but wising up that Ben is the better leader. Regardless of who was good and who was otherwise, however, none of them survive, picked off one by one or as part of the climactic final scene. Just going to show, when the end is truly nigh, your character doesn't contribute anything to the final outcome. The good, the bad, and the innocent. When the end is the end, not even the power of plot can save you. This is the factor which is sorely lacking in modern survival films. The fact that the main cast always seem to survive in full, with only a handful of nameless characters meeting their demise, and maybe an extended main character member. Once you've seen one, you've seen them all. Not Night of the Living Dead. Speaking of which, let's take a look at the living dead themselves. Though actually never referred to directly as zombies, the bodies of the recently deceased rising to hunt the flesh of the living are actually portrayed very well indeed by the massive cast of extras. They really nail the blank, expressionless wandering around like Borg that haven't acquired a target when they first appear. But when they clap eyes on someone, you can tell their whole being is screaming kill in their heads. And nothing, not the distance, not a door or a wall will get in their way. The makeup was minimal but effective, largely due to each extra's physical performance. But at the same time, you can't tell if that figure wandering in the distance is man or zombie. That's the trick to a great zombie film. The subtlety and the fear of not knowing. The film's tragic finale was so thick with tension and suspense, all coming to a head, that it has lived in cinema history. Throughout the film, the entire group has been so determined to survive, putting up barricades, making escape plans, and putting all of their lives into making them work. But when the end arrives and the doors begin to give way, you can almost feel the moment where they abandon all hope and just give up. Barbara, who spent most of the film cowering as far away from the walls as she could, suddenly decides, the hell with it. She's probably going to die, so she's going to die on her feet. Ben decides that he's had enough of Harry's constant attempts at treachery and puts him down himself, and Harry's wife doesn't seem at all shaken by that. But the real moment when all hope is lost is when Harry's own daughter is revealed to have been bitten and rises as an undead, killing both her father and her mother. This is probably the moment where Ben gives up as well, with the hopeless situation feeling even more hopeless as he just locks himself in the cellar and waits till dawn. You know, very often when I've avoided something for a long time and then finally decide to give it a chance, I have an overwhelming feeling of regret that I didn't try it sooner. Zombie films, or good ones at least, are one such case. Night of the Living Dead isn't just a good zombie film, it's a great one, heralding from a better time in horror movie history and proving all the more effective for it. And for that, I'd award the film a strong 8 on the Orsometer. One of the best zombie films ever made, and a must-see for any and all fans of the genre. So that was an 8 on the Orsometer for Night of the Living Dead. I've been Wiseman Tanofsky. This has been WMT Reviews 12 Nights of Halloween. Thank you very much for listening.